The sun was just beginning to warm the quiet countryside as Marta Jennings stepped outside her farmhouse, leash in hand. The morning air was crisp, filled with the sweet scent of pine and fresh earth. It was the kind of day that made you want to pause and breathe deep, to feel the calm settle into your bones. Beside her, Rusty, her golden retriever, wagged his tail eagerly, ready for their usual walk along the forest trail. Marta smiled at Rusty's excitement. "Ready, boy?" she asked softly. Rusty barked once and tugged gently on the leash, impatient. To begin. Every morning, like clockwork, they walked the same path, a narrow dirt trail that wound through towering trees, past patches of wildflowers, and alongside a sparkling creek. It was their little escape from the bustle of everyday life. As they moved along the trail, Rusty sniffed the ground with interest, occasionally looking up at Marta as if to say, "What's next?" Birds chirped overhead, their melodies weaving. Through the rustling leaves, sunlight filtered through the branches, casting warm patches on the forest floor. The world felt safe, familiar. But then something changed. Rusty's ears twitched and his head snapped up. Marta noticed the sudden shift in his behavior. His tail stopped wagging and instead stiffened, his body tensed like a coiled spring. Before she could ask what was wrong, Rusty bolted off the path, his leash slipping from Marta's grasp. "Rusty, come back," Marta called, panic rising in her voice. Rusty was already sprinting toward the thick trees, barking sharply. The sound was urgent, desperate, and then she heard it too. A faint, trembling cry coming from somewhere deep within the forest. Marta's heart hammered in her chest. "Hold on, Rusty," she shouted, pushing herself to run after him. The underbrush scratched at her arms as she stumbled forward, the forest suddenly feeling darker and more confusing than it had just moments before. The cries echoed between the trees, fragile and urgent. Rusty disappeared from sight, but not from sound. His barks became louder, mixed with whimpering and the childlike cries that sent chills down Marta's spine. Something was very wrong. Marta tried to keep calm. She took a deep breath, calling Rusty's name again. She followed the noises as best she could, the familiar trail lost beneath her feet in the chaos of branches and leaves. Her mind raced. Who could be crying out here? Was it a lost hiker, a trapped animal, or worse, a child? The forest, usually so welcoming, now seemed to close in around her. The shadows shifted and the gentle morning light was swallowed by the thick canopy. Each step forward felt heavier, the urgency pressing on her like a weight. Rusty's barking was coming from ahead, urgent and fierce, a beacon cutting through the quiet. Marta's legs burned, but she pushed herself harder. "Please be okay," she whispered, praying for whoever was in trouble. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marta broke through a dense thicket into a small clearing bathed in soft sunlight. There just ahead was Rusty. But he wasn't alone. Dragging slowly behind him was something small and fragile, something that made Marta's breath catch in her throat. Rusty's eyes met hers, filled with a calm determination that surprised her after all the chaos. The figure he pulled through the leaves was a child, a tiny boy no more than 2 or 3 years old, with tangled hair and wide, scared eyes. He was wrapped in nothing but a thin shirt and pants, his feet bare and dirty. The boy clung tightly to Rusty's fur, trembling but alive. Rusty's grip was careful, gentle, as if he knew exactly how delicate his rescue was. Marta dropped to her knees, reaching out to the child, her hands shaking as she wrapped him in her jacket. "It's okay. You're safe now," she whispered, trying to soothe both the boy and herself. Tears pricked her eyes as she looked down. At the child's tear-streaked face, a mixture of relief and disbelief flooding her. Rusty sat beside them, tail wagging slowly, eyes never leaving the boy. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, as if witnessing the quiet miracle that had just unfolded. Marta knew they needed help fast. She pulled out her phone, hands trembling as she dialed 911, hoping against hope that help would come soon enough. Marta's breath came in short bursts as she struggled to keep pace with Rusty. The dog, sensing something urgent, had darted off, the familiar path without looking back. Branches snagged at her clothes, and roots threatened to trip her with every step, but she refused to slow down. The cries echoing through the dense forest were faint but unmistakable, an unmistakable sound of distress that clawed at her heart. "Rusty," she called again, louder this time, but the dog was already weaving expertly through the trees, his sleek golden coat flashing in the dappled sunlight. Rusty's usual calm and obedient nature had been replaced with fierce determination. He pushed forward without hesitation, as if guided by some invisible thread pulling him toward the source of the cries. The forest was thick here, tall pines, and oaks stood like silent sentinels, their trunks casting long shadows across the moss-covered ground. The air was cooler beneath the canopy, carrying a damp, earthy smell that mingled with the sweet scent of pine needles. Marta's heart pounded not just from the exertion, but from worry. What if whoever was crying was hurt? What if they were lost, or worse? She stumbled over a fallen branch and caught herself on a tree trunk, gasping for air. Rusty's barks rang, out again sharper and more urgent, pulling her forward. The dog was close to the source now, she could feel it. The cries grew louder, more desperate. They weren't the soft sobs of a scared child anymore. They were urgent pleas, a small voice calling out for help. Marta's mind raced. She was used to walking these woods, but she'd never heard anything like this before. The forest, so often a place of peace, now felt wild and unpredictable. Her fingers tightened around a low-hanging branch as she scrambled up a slight incline. The terrain was uneven, littered with rocks and fallen leaves that crunched beneath her feet. Rusty was ahead, darting in and out of view, his sharp eyes scanning the underbrush. "Hold on, Rusty," she whispered. "We're coming." Then, from between two trees, Rusty burst into a small clearing. Marta followed quickly and stopped short. The sight before her was both heartbreaking and hopeful. There, tangled among the ferns and low shrubs, was a small figure, a boy no older than 2 or 3, crouched against a tree trunk, his cheeks streaked with dirt and tears. His tiny hands covered his face as he sobbed, his body trembling with fear. Rusty sat beside him, head tilted and eyes bright with concern. Marta felt a rush of relief but also deep sadness. "Hey there, it's okay," she said softly, kneeling a few feet away to avoid startling him. "We're here to help." The boy peeked through his fingers, his eyes wide and shining with confusion. He let out a small whimper as Rusty nuzzled his side, offering comfort. Marta reached slowly into her pocket, pulling out a small snack she always carried for Rusty. "You're safe now," she said gently, breaking the snack into pieces and holding it out. The boy hesitated, then reached for the food, his fingers shaky but hungry. Rusty wagged his tail, leaning against the boy, who wrapped a tiny arm around the dog's neck. The bond between them was clear. Rusty was his protector, his friend in a terrifying moment. Marta's mind spun with questions. Who was this boy? How had he gotten lost in the forest? And how long had he been out here, alone and scared? But those questions could wait. Right now the boy needed help, and Marta needed to find a way to get them both back safely. She pulled out her phone again, but there was no signal deep in the woods. Frustration and fear pressed on her chest. She had to get back to the trailhead where the signal was stronger. Carefully, she scooped the boy into her arms, feeling how light and fragile he was. "Let's go, Rusty," she said, voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Rusty jumped up eagerly, ready to lead the way out. Together, the unlikely trio began. The slow trek back, the forest around them alive with whispers of the morning breeze. Every rustle of leaves, every bird call was a reminder that time was precious and hope was fragile. But with Rusty's steady presence and Marta's determination, they moved forward, toward safety, toward answers, and toward the relief that awaited them just beyond the trees. The forest seemed endless, a vast sea of towering trees and tangled branches stretching in every direction. Marta felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders as she carried the small boy carefully in her arms. His body was light, almost fragile, and despite his tears, there was a quiet stillness about him, a mix of exhaustion and relief. Rusty trotted ahead, occasionally turning to glance back at Marta and the child, his tail wagging slowly but steadily. The dog's calm presence was a steady anchor in the swirling chaos of emotions and fears. Marta whispered soothing words to the boy, though she didn't know his name yet. "You're safe now. We're going to get you help." The boy looked up briefly, his wide eyes meeting hers. There was something about those eyes so full of confusion and vulnerability that made Marta's heart ache. She wished she could do more than just carry him through the forest. She wished she could erase the fear etched into his face. As they moved deeper into the woods, Marta's thoughts raced. How long had the boy been lost? What dangers had he faced? The forest, though beautiful, was no place for a toddler alone. There were thorns, insects, even wild animals. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves made her heart jump. Then, suddenly, Rusty stopped. He stood alert, ears perked, nose twitching. Marta followed his gaze and saw it too. A small clearing, a head bathed in soft sunlight. But more than that, something unexpected. Footprints. Small footprints, barely visible, pressed into the soft earth, leading away from the path. Marta's pulse quickened. These were the boy's footprints. She was sure of it. They told a story of wandering, of someone trying to find their way, lost and afraid. "He's been walking," Marta whispered. "He must have been scared," Rusty growled softly, a low warning that made Marta stop and listen. Somewhere nearby, the cries started. Again faint, desperate, but this time mixed with something else, a call, a shout. Marta's heart leapt. Maybe it was a search party. Maybe help was closer than she thought. She hurried toward the sound, clutching the boy tighter. Then, out of the shadows between the trees, a figure emerged. It was a man, tall and breathless, eyes wide with relief and disbelief. "Eli!" the man shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "Eli, where have you been?" The boy stirred in Marta's arms, his eyes fluttering open. The man rushed forward, tears streaming down his face. "Thank God," he said, dropping to his knees beside them. "My son. I thought I'd lost him forever." Marta let the man take the boy gently, watching the reunion with tears of her own. "I found him," she said quietly. "He was crying, lost in the forest." The man nodded, gratitude shining in his eyes. "We've been searching for hours." The whole family was panicked. Rusty wagged his tail, happy to see the boy safe. The dog's calm bravery had led Marta right to the child, but the relief on everyone's faces told her the real miracle was that Eli was unharmed. As the man stood and hugged Eli close, Marta took a deep breath. The forest no longer felt threatening. It was a place of rescue, of hope, and of a dog's unwavering loyalty. Police and rescue teams soon arrived, guiding Marta and the man back to the trailhead where more family members waited anxiously. Eli's mother rushed forward, sobbing with relief as she hugged her son. "Thank you," she whispered to Marta, her voice trembling. Marta smiled softly, looking down at Rusty, who sat obediently by her side. "It was Rusty," she said. "He never gave up." The crowd murmured in awe as the story spread quickly. A lost child found safe because of a dog's keen senses and courage. It was a moment that would be remembered long after the sun set on that quiet morning. As the rescue team took over, Marta felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. But mixed with that fatigue was an undeniable sense of peace. She had been part of something extraordinary. Rusty leaned against her leg, content and proud. His mission was complete. And for Marta, the memory of a frightened boy in her arms saved from the forest's shadows would stay with her forever. As Marta dialed 911, her hands trembled with a mixture of relief and urgency. The tiny boy in her arms was quiet now, wrapped tightly in her jacket, but his wide eyes still flickered with fear and confusion. Rusty sat alert beside her, watching the forest as if guarding them from any unseen threat. "What's your emergency?" The calm voice on the other end of the line brought a small measure of reassurance. "There's a little boy," Marta said quickly. "Lost in the forest behind my house. I found him with my dog. He's scared and alone. We need help. Please, hurry." The dispatcher asked for details, and Marta gave them the best information she could. Her location, the condition of the boy, and that they were moving toward the trailhead where cell service was better. The call was brief but precise. Every second mattered. After hanging up, Marta looked down at the boy who was now slowly calming in her arms. She stroked his hair gently, whispering soft words she hoped would ease his panic. "You're safe now, little one. We're going to get you help soon." Rusty gave a low, comforting whine, pressing his head against the boy's small hand. Marta smiled through her exhaustion. There was something almost magical about the bond between the dog and child, but the forest was vast, and the way back wasn't easy. Marta began the slow trek toward the trailhead, carefully navigating the uneven ground. Each step was deliberate. She didn't want to jostle the boy or risk slipping. Branches scratched her arms and the thick undergrowth tugged at her clothes, but she kept moving, driven by hope and necessity. Rusty ran ahead a few yards, then stopped, looking back to make sure Marta and the boy were following. His keen senses kept them on track, following familiar landmarks, even though the way was more difficult off the beaten path. The boy shivered slightly, and Marta wrapped her jacket tighter around him. "Almost there," she whispered, though she wasn't sure how far it really was. Every minute felt stretched thin, every heartbeat louder than the last. As they moved, Marta replayed everything that had happened that morning. How Rusty had suddenly taken off, how the cries had led her through thick woods and finally to the small clearing where she found the child. It was a sequence of moments, each critical, that had saved a life. The sound of distant voices reached her ears. Searchers, volunteers, maybe even family members calling out for the boy. The hope that they were close pushed her forward with renewed energy. Finally, the trees thinned, and the edge of the forest came into view. Marta's phone buzzed with a call. It was the dispatcher, confirming that rescue teams were on their way to her location. Relief washed over her like a tide. She quickened her pace, careful not to trip as she neared the trailhead. Ahead, she saw figures moving, search and rescue personnel, neighbors holding flashlights and blankets, and a woman who looked frantic and desperate. "Eli!" the woman cried, rushing toward them. "My baby, you're safe!" Marta felt tears sting her eyes as she gently handed the boy into his mother's arms. The reunion was raw and emotional. The mother clutched her son tightly, whispering promises and tears of gratitude. Around them, the crowd began to murmur and cheer quietly, the tension breaking like a wave. Rusty wagged his tail, panting happily, and the rescue workers smiled, praising the dog's bravery and Marta's quick action. Paramedics checked the boy carefully, noting that despite being lost for hours, he was in surprisingly good condition. His cheeks were flushed, his breathing steady, and there were only minor scrapes on his knees and hands. The doctors credited the dog's companionship for keeping the boy calm and warm. A true lifesaver. News crews began arriving, drawn by the story of the heroic dog and the courageous woman. Cameras captured the emotional scenes as reporters interviewed Marta and the boy's family, spreading the story far beyond the quiet town. Marta watched as Eli was wrapped in a blanket, smiling shyly at Rusty, who had become his guardian angel. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her morning walk had turned into a rescue mission. Though exhausted, she knew this was just the beginning. Questions needed answers. How had Eli wandered off? How could such a small child get so far into the woods alone? And most importantly, how to ensure no other family would experience this nightmare. For now, though, the fear had lifted. The boy was safe, thanks to a dog's sharp ears, a woman's determination, and the power of a community ready to help. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light over the reunion, Marta knelt beside Rusty, scratching behind his ears. "You did something incredible today, boy," she said softly. Rusty wagged his tail, eyes shining with quiet pride. And in that moment, surrounded by relief and gratitude, the forest felt a little less wild and a lot more like home. The rescue team's arrival brought a wave of relief that spread through the crowd gathered at the forest's edge. Marta stood quietly nearby, watching as Eli's family embraced him tightly, their tears mingling with laughter and sobs of gratitude. The little boy, still clutching Rusty's fur, looked safe but exhausted, a miracle to everyone who had feared the worst. As the paramedics checked Eli over, a local police officer approached Marta with a kind smile. "Thank you for what you did today," he said. "Your quick thinking and Rusty's courage saved this boy's life." Marta nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle around her. "I just followed Rusty. He knew where to go." The officer glanced toward the clearing where the search had focused for hours. "We've been searching since early morning," he explained. Eli's family was having a picnic nearby. He must have wandered off when no one was looking. The story began to piece together like a puzzle. Eli's parents had come to the forest with a group of relatives for a quiet day, outdoors, unaware of the danger until Eli vanished. The boy had slipped away while playing, drawn perhaps by curiosity or the sounds of the woods. Once lost, he'd been too scared to call for help, relying only on his tiny voice and Rusty's presence to stay safe. News reporters gathered, eager to share the tale of the brave dog and the devoted woman who had changed the outcome of what could have been a tragedy. Cameras captured footage of Rusty, the golden retriever, sitting calmly beside Eli's mother as she gently rocked her son. "We are so grateful," Eli's mother said, her voice trembling. "We didn't know where he was, or if he was okay. When we heard the news that he was found, thanks to this amazing dog, we couldn't believe it." Marta watched as Eli's family wrapped him in warm blankets, comforting him with soft words. Despite the ordeal, Eli showed signs of resilience, a spark of life that gave everyone hope. Local authorities promised to increase patrols and safety measures around the forest trails, ensuring that no other child could slip away unnoticed. The community rallied, volunteers signing up for search teams and neighborhood watches. Rusty became a local hero overnight. Children in the nearby town asked if they could meet the brave dog who had saved Eli. The story spread beyond the small town, reaching neighboring communities and inspiring others. For Marta, the experience was humbling. She had simply done what anyone would, responded to a cry for help. But seeing the relief and joy on Eli's family's faces made her realize the profound impact of even the smallest actions. "Sometimes," she said later, "all it takes is listening and trusting your instincts." As the day wore on, Eli's family invited Marta and Rusty to join them for a quiet dinner, a way to thank them for their bravery. The bond that had formed in the forest grew stronger with every shared smile and story. Marta felt a deep sense of connection, not just to Eli and his family, but to the entire community that had come together in the face of fear and uncertainty. The forest, once a place of worry, now felt like a symbol of hope and resilience. Rusty lay at Marta's feet that evening, tired but content. His eyes sparkled with the quiet pride of a hero who had done what was right without hesitation. And, as night fell, Marta knew that this story, the story of a lost boy, a brave dog, and a determined woman, would be remembered for years to come, because sometimes the most ordinary moments can become the most extraordinary. Days passed since Eli's rescue, but the questions about how he had wandered so far into the forest still lingered in everyone's minds. The relief of his safe return was immense, but the mystery of the missing toddler's journey weighed heavily on Marta, Eli's family, and the local authorities. Marta found herself thinking back to the moment she heard the cries. How sharp and desperate they were. How small and fragile Eli had looked when she found him, curled up beside Rusty. The experience had changed her in subtle ways, making her more aware of the fragility of life and the importance of vigilance. The local police launched a thorough investigation. They interviewed Eli's parents, relatives, and neighbors, piecing together the timeline of the day. The family shared how they had been enjoying a picnic near a well-used trail, unaware that Eli had slipped away. Their story was one of distraction, a momentary lapse when no one noticed the boy was gone. Authorities inspected the forest paths, looking for potential hazards or blind spots where a child could easily get lost. The trails were popular with families and hikers, but some areas were denser and less visible. Signs were put up, warning parents to keep a close eye on their children, and plans were made to increase patrols during busy times. The community's response was overwhelming. Neighbors organized workshops on child safety in natural settings, and volunteers formed a group to maintain and monitor the forest trails. The incident had sparked a collective sense of responsibility, turning fear into proactive care. Marta was invited to speak at a local meeting about her role in Eli's rescue. Standing before a crowd of attentive faces, she shared the story of Rusty's sudden dash into the woods, her frantic search, and the moment she found the boy. Her voice trembled with emotion, but her message was clear. Sometimes it's the quiet instincts that save us, the courage to act when it matters most. The audience applauded warmly, and many thanked her for reminding them that even in small towns, dangers could lurk unnoticed. Meanwhile, Eli's parents struggled with a mix of gratitude and guilt. They were thankful beyond words that their son was safe, yet they wrestled with the fear of what could have happened. Counseling was offered to help them cope with the trauma, and community members rallied around them with support. Rusty became a symbol not only of bravery, but of hope. The dog's calm demeanor and loyalty had been key to finding Eli, and his story inspired many to appreciate the special bond between humans and animals. One afternoon, Marta received a call from a local journalist who wanted to write a feature on Rusty and the rescue. The article highlighted the importance of listening to instincts and the unexpected heroes who emerge in times of crisis. Marta smiled as she recalled the day, how an ordinary walk had turned into a life-saving mission. She realized that while the questions about Eli's disappearance remained, the experience had brought the community closer together, weaving a story of compassion, courage, and resilience. In the quiet moments that followed, Marta often found herself walking through the forest again, this time with a new sense of purpose. The trees no longer seemed daunting but welcoming, filled with stories and lessons about life's fragile beauty. And though the mystery of how Eli got lost might never be fully solved, one truth was clear: sometimes it takes a village and a brave dog to bring a lost child home. The days following Eli's rescue felt surreal for Marta. The small town, once quiet and routine, had transformed into a place buzzing with new purpose and connection. The story of Rusty's heroic dash into the forest and the safe return of the lost toddler had sparked something bigger than anyone had expected. Marta found herself invited to community meetings, school events, and neighborhood gatherings, where people shared their own stories and fears. The experience had opened many eyes to the vulnerability hidden in everyday moments and the importance of looking out for one another. Local schools started safety programs, teaching children and parents about what to do if someone gets lost or separated. Volunteers organized forest cleanups and improved trail markers, making the woods safer for families and visitors. What had once been a simple place for walks became a symbol of community care and awareness. For Eli's family, the recovery was ongoing. The trauma of losing their child in the woods left invisible scars that wouldn't heal overnight. Yet the support from friends, neighbors, and even strangers brought comfort and strength. Marta often visited them, bringing meals and companionship. Watching as they slowly reclaimed their peace, Rusty remained at Marta's side through it all, a steady and comforting presence. The dog seemed to understand the gravity of what had happened and the bond he shared with Eli. Whenever Eli visited, Rusty greeted him with gentle excitement, their friendship a bright spot in the healing process. One afternoon, as Marta walked Rusty through the forest trails, she paused at the clearing where she first found Eli. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting warm patterns on the ground. The memory of that moment, so tense, so fragile, felt both distant and vivid. She knelt down, touching the earth softly. "Thank you, Rusty," she whispered, "for leading me here, for saving a life." Rusty wagged his tail, looking up at her with those steady, trusting eyes. The community's appreciation extended beyond words. A local artist created a mural near the town square, depicting Rusty and Eli surrounded by trees and sunlight, a lasting tribute to courage and hope. Families brought flowers and notes, grateful for the reminder that even in the darkest moments light could be found. Marta's own life shifted in subtle ways. The rescue mission awakened in her a passion for helping others, inspiring her to volunteer with search and rescue teams and to advocate for child safety programs. She realized that sometimes the most unexpected events could change the course of one's life. Yet, amidst the healing and progress, a quiet question remained. How had Eli gotten so far into the forest alone? Despite the investigations and safety measures, that part of the story was still a mystery. One evening, as the town gathered for a community picnic, Eli's parents spoke openly about their hopes for the future. "We want to make sure no other family goes through what we did," they said. "This experience has taught us the power of community, of watching out for one another." Marta smiled, feeling a deep connection to everyone present. The forest around them was no longer just a backdrop. It was a place that had tested them, changed them, and brought them together. As the sun set, casting golden hues over the trees, Rusty lay quietly at Marta's feet. The dog's journey from a curious pet to a local hero was complete, but the bonds he helped form would last a lifetime. And for Marta, the story of the dog who rushed into the forest after hearing cries, and the boy who was found because of it, was more than just a tale. It was a reminder of the courage that lives in all of us, waiting to be awakened when it matters most. Weeks turned into months, but the impact of that unforgettable day in the forest remained fresh in everyone's hearts. The story of Rusty, the loyal dog, and Eli, the lost toddler, had grown into a powerful symbol of hope, courage, and community spirit. Marta often found herself reflecting on how a simple walk had turned into a life-changing event. The moment Rusty bolted into the forest, driven by a sound only he could hear, set off a chain reaction that saved a child's life. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts can have the greatest consequences. The town had changed in subtle yet meaningful ways. New safety programs were now a regular part of school curriculums. Families grew more vigilant, watching over one another and the children with renewed care. The forest trails, once seen as just a quiet place to explore, became a cherished and carefully protected part of the community. Rusty's heroism was honored in many ways. The mural in the town square became a meeting place, a source of inspiration, for children and adults alike. Marta often visited the mural with Rusty, sharing stories with neighbors and reminding everyone of the power of kindness and bravery. Eli's family found comfort in the ongoing support from friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had been touched by their story. Their journey through fear and relief had not been easy, but it had strengthened bonds and created new friendships, rooted in compassion. One crisp autumn afternoon, Marta received an invitation from the local community center. They were hosting an event to celebrate everyday heroes, people and animals who make a difference in the lives of others. Marta knew exactly who her guest of honor would be. At the event, the room was filled with smiles and applause as Rusty was recognized for his courage. The dog, ever humble, wagged his tail and accepted the attention with quiet grace. Marta stood, proudly by his side, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The mayor spoke about the importance of community and how moments of crisis can bring out the best in people. This story, the mayor said, reminds us that hope and bravery live in all of us, and that together we can overcome even the darkest moments. After the ceremony, Marta and Eli's family spoke privately, sharing their gratitude and the ways their lives had changed. They promised to continue working together to promote safety and awareness, turning a frightening experience into a force for good. Marta also began volunteering regularly with search and rescue teams, inspired by the difference she and Rusty had made. She trained other dogs and volunteers, sharing her story to encourage preparedness and quick action. Rusty, now something of a local legend, continued to be a beloved companion, but also a reminder of how instinct, loyalty, and love can change lives. The bond between Marta, Rusty, and Eli remained strong, a testament to the extraordinary moments that can arise from the ordinary. As winter approached, the forest grew quiet again, covered in a blanket of snow. But the warmth of that summer day, the day a dog rushed into the forest after hearing cries and brought a child back to safety, would never fade. It was a story passed down from neighbor to neighbor, told by parents to children, a lasting legacy of hope that in the face of fear, courage, and kindness can light the way. And for Marta, Rusty, and Eli's family, that day was a reminder that no matter how lost someone may seem, there is always a path back, sometimes led by the most unexpected heroes.